From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick BERES.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this Thursday. Nick BERES here with you, and I hope you'll join in the show. As always on this program, we have the phone right here next to me, and you're all invited to join in the conversation. If you have a question or comment this morning, we're going to talk about legal matters, all right? Specifically, one of our regular guests, a terrific lawyer who specializes in malpractice law, but a lawyer who can also speak in general terms about some things that's happening in the state right now because of the pandemic. But again, malpractice. So ask yourself as you sit there whether you or someone you know has a situation you're dealing with, a hospital or a doctor or something along those lines where you think maybe something was done wrong, where you may have a malpractice case, and we'll get into what it takes to determine that. But this is the show for it, and you have a legal option if you think you do. So let's introduce our guest this morning. You know him, you love him. Clint Kelly joining us this morning. Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Nick. How are you doing this morning?
Doing good. It's good to see that you're safe and you're at home this morning and joining us. And listen, this affects all lawyers, not just malpractice experts like yourself. But I guess it was this week the Tennessee Supreme Court issued again, laying down the law. I think no more trials. There won't be jury trials in the state until sometime in January. And I guess, Clint, I know you and I are in this Middle Tennessee area, but some of the counties surrounding were having jury trials, and I'm guessing now everything stops. How do you understand this, and how is it going to affect legal practices?
Sure. Yes, they have renewed the emergency declaration, have suspended all jury trials, civil and criminal, until January the 31st, at which time they'll revisit the issue. Now, there is an exception if there are specific hardships or reasons that make a jury trial necessary. You can petition the Chief Justice and show cause as to why your trial should go forward. But without that exception, nobody's going to get their case tried, at least till the end of January. And my view, Nick, is I don't think much is going to change between the end of January and probably until March or April, when the weather changes. Don't you think that's pretty much going to be the way it is?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're going to need a vaccine, something along those lines, because it's spiking so much. I'm wondering, with that being the case, not having jury trials, I'm not sure if this will apply to the type of cases you handle in malpractice, but will this create more incentive for folks to reach settlements or plea agreements as opposed to banking on going to trial?
Yeah, we've had mixed record on that. There have been some cases that have settled as a result of this. On the other hand, there have been some cases like one I'm involved in right now that was set in January that got bumped and moved into May, and that case has not been settled. And there have been a few others. So I talked to some of my friends that do not only this, but personal injury work in general. And in their cases, they've said the insurance companies have taken a hard line because every day that a case isn't going to trial is another day the insurance company sits on its money.
Right. You know what? I was thinking it could go the other way as opposed to incentive to settle. The defendants can just say, look, well, yeah, let's put this off as long as we can, and maybe that delays things down the line on that. And so you're seeing it kind of both ways on that, I suppose, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, there's an incentive, particularly for insurance companies, when they have money sitting in reserve and you're drawing interest, because it's basically an interest-bearing investment. They can sit on it for months, maybe even up to a year longer, and draw interest on that money before they're required to pay it. So there are incentives to defendants and insurance companies holding off on settlements or forcing injured people to take less than what their case is worth to get their case settled. So that's one of the very dangerous effects of having a jury trial system that's frozen, or people can't get help. And, you know, Nick, there are a lot of people right now, particularly ones that are hurt, who can't work, who have jobs. Some are so lucky enough to have jobs, but are injured so badly they can't return to work and got no way to feed themselves, and they can't get their case heard. They can't get their day in court. Those people are suffering my heart goes out to them.
I agree. And I'm wondering, I know you don't handle criminal cases, yours are civil, but you just made a good example of these folks that are waiting and have no other options. Do you, as a lawyer in general, and obviously you had to study all this as you got educated, but I mean, this almost sounds like in some cases a constitutional crisis. There's no way around it because there's this crazy pandemic, but especially in criminal cases, Clint. And again, I know that's not your expertise there, but I mean, there are people maybe who can't afford to pay bond that have been locked up who should have by now, under normal circumstances, had their day in court, and yet they continue just sitting there behind bars because of this. And you just wonder, I mean, your right to a fair trial, a speedy and quick trial, that stuff's all out the window. What about the Constitution?
Well, let's all remember these people who are in jail on bond because they can't bond out are presumed innocent. Mm-hmm. They're sitting in jail, presumed innocent.
Right.
Let that soak for a minute. With that said, some of these people will get credit for time served, but there will be people that are served more time than they otherwise would have because they can't get to court and can't get their case tried. Constitutionally, as you said, I'm not a criminal expert, but it seems to me that there's going to be a conflict between the constitutional right to a speedy trial and, the safety of jurors and other litigants having their case heard. It's bad all the way around, Nick. There's nothing good coming from
No,
this.
you're right. And you talk about, well, okay, you can, tally up time served. What about the people there that are actually innocent? And we know there are people locked up right now that are innocent, and they need their day in court to prove that. And all these days, they never get them back. Anyway, it is a very difficult situation, and it'll just have to be dealt with, and it will be. Listen, as far as malpractice cases, and we'll take a call or two here in a moment, but what are you seeing with regard to malpractice, and is there anything coming out of this pandemic that is creating cases that might be otherwise something you would not see?
Yeah, as I predicted months ago, what's going to happen in this situation is as the census in the COVID units rise, mm-hmm. resources to other patients who need elective procedures or other types of procedures are going to get shortchanged to some extent. And so the question is going to be, how do the hospitals manage the demand on the one hand for the patients who don't have COVID versus the demand on the other for the patients who do, and how well prepared are they for this? Because everyone knew, just like we knew in March what was coming, everyone knew during the summer what was coming in the fall. Dr. Fauci, might as well have been shouting from the top of the rooftops in the past few months. We all knew this fall surge was going to happen. So the question is, how prepared are the hospitals to handle this? And are some people going to die or be seriously injured because they weren't prepared or they made some bad decisions about how to allocate resources? And I won't know that, we won't know that as a society probably for a number of months until people start dying or getting injured in hospitals because of hospital mistakes.
And that's what's really interesting to me, as you've told me and told our viewers time and again, when you determine whether or not someone maybe has a case in malpractice, it looks at standard of care. So everything here is new, but you're saying, Clint, you're going to be able to look at these situations perhaps, because you can't blame the hospital for all of a sudden being inundated and wondering what the heck we're going to do. But at some point you'll be able to say, look, we understand you were inundated, but you saw this coming and you made some choices that were bad and should not have been the standard that cost someone his or her life. Thus, you may have a case. I'm just wondering, that's what it's going to come down to, whether or not you can say, look, that hospital, yes, this is a hardship, but they should have known better, and there are these things, standard of care, they should have done. I guess you look at the hospitals as a whole and say, well, most of them did this. You didn't, and you had a bunch of people die, so you may be open to liability.
Sure. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's take example number one, where a patient gets a medication that was not prescribed and dies as a result of it. Okay. That would be a situation that I don't think has anything to do with COVID or COVID census. That's just a screw up of epic proportions, easily preventable. The hospital's going to have to pay up for that one without any real good defense. Take example number two, where a patient is waiting to have surgery to relieve an epidural abscess on their spine, and the neurosurgeon is off taking care of some COVID patient who has some type of neurological disorder, and so they're rationing time and the patient with the abscess doesn't get into surgery as early as he or she should have, and as a result becomes paralyzed. Well, in that case, I expect the hospital to defend its actions, saying, look, there's only one guy can't be in two places at the same time. We have to somehow find a way to make these schedules marry up in the safest way possible. And unfortunately, in this situation, it just didn't happen, and people are going to die. That's what I think I'm going to be running into in the months to come, are those type of arguments from the hospital.
Yeah, and if I'm sitting here, whenever you give me these scenarios, I always think if I'm in a jury, and I think I would have some sympathy for the hospital in that case. Now, I may learn more otherwise, but we all know, I mean, there's only so many neurosurgeons, and they have to do triage, and that's the sad fact. It may be no one's fault, but people are going to die. I don't know, Clint. It depends on other circumstances as well, I assume. But I would have some sympathy in that second scenario with the hospital. I mean, yeah, they're going to try, but if it's an emergency that just pops up out of the blue, I mean, how could they have prepared for that, right?
Well, let's remember a few things. First of all, these are highly trained, well-paid professionals and very well-financed hospitals who have had months going all the way back to January to see this coming. And now we're into November. If they haven't gotten ready by now, they weren't ever going to get ready.
Point taken. As I said, there's always other circumstances. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all develops, and I hate the fact that there's going to be more people dying. Clint, listen, take a break. We already have some calls waiting for you. We'll get to Joe and Jane and others when we come back. If you have questions about malpractice, cases maybe that you're dealing with or a loved one is, and you want to find out if you have something, Clint's the best there is. We'll be back with him right after this.